Hi everybody. How are you doing? How is your afternoon going so far? Great, lovely. Welcome to Love and Money, or For Love, Money, Art and Funding panel. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to read the land statement to acknowledge this land we're on. On behalf of North Seattle College, we acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish, a people that are still here, continuing to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We ask that we take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. So, once again, thank you all for being here and for joining us this afternoon. We're going to have a great conversation about art with these lovely panel of women of color. So our first panelist is Gisella Bustillos. She is a filmmaker, director of the Seattle Documentary Association. They will all go more into what they do in a little bit, but these are just some general introductions. Next up, we have Andrea LeHalle, filmmaker, film festival organizer and director, video manager at Sound Transit. Next up, Vivian Hsieh, executive director of the Northwest Film Forum. Next to her, we have Elisheba Johnson, social practice, okay, this one's a little bit lengthy, social practice artist / arts admin, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, public art project manager, founding member of Collect. Johnson is a co-author of Capacity Building for Racial Equity in Public Art. Did you know you did all that stuff? And then next to her we have Hsieh, theater artist and award-winning actor, playwright, director, and producer, cultural partnerships and grants manager at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, and adjunct professor on Asian American theater for the University of Washington. Can you give a warm welcome to our panelists? Lovely. So the panelists, this event with the reception taking place after, has been brought to you by North Seattle, obviously, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the art folks who are fantastic, student leadership, and the library. So if we would like to get started with our panelists kind of sharing a little bit more, y'all each have a few minutes to kind of share your lovely work with our beautiful folks. So first up, according to the alphabet, Gisella.
Oh, that actually is me, so it worked out. Great. Hi, my name is Gisella Bustillos. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I actually used to be the president of the Seattle Documentary Association, but I no longer am. I got into film when I was in high school. That was my first experience in it, and I can get more into that later. But I did my undergrad in NYU for film and TV. After I graduated, I was working at an ad agency in New York for a little bit. And then I kind of had a quarter-life crisis, and I was like, oh, well, I went to film school, so I should probably make a film at some point in my life. And then quit my job, moved back home, which is here in Seattle, and then I ended up creating a documentary called A Brief History of Time Travel, which premiered last July at San Diego Comic-Con, which is pretty awesome. And I'm actually going to show it to you guys. Yeah, here, that's the poster, and that's the link.
When was the last time you dreamed about what the future holds, or changing a moment from the past? These are questions that human beings have thought about since the beginning of our existence. Where would you go if you could travel through time?
It'd be great to time travel and watch some big dinosaurs walking around. It'd be great to time travel into one of the very exciting moments where there are great works of art being made, where great discoveries were being made. Watch the original Olympics.
For me, being able to reach a far distant future would very much be interesting because of those reasons. Just seeing and experiencing the world in a way that we just can't even fathom today whatsoever.
Well, we all wish we were younger. We all wish we had more time. So wouldn't it be cool to time travel? Furthermore, I wonder what it would be like to meet Michael Faraday.
I think the world will be totally different. You think 100 years ago, how different things were.
I feel that we all of us, want to know what's going to happen in the future. And all of us would like to know what would happen in the past, to either see things that happened in the past or to alter things in our life. You can say, I don't believe this desk is here, but then you're saying, I don't want to believe facts. That's a fact. Time travel is real.
Join us in a mind-bending exploration of time travel, its origins, its evolution, and its influence on how we perceive time itself.
Great, and you can go ahead and just start the PowerPoint. So I did not want to, oh, yes. I did not want to, I'm actually a very shy, introverted person. My theater background is what I'm here to share today. And so instead of me performing, there's a bunch of photos of a range of different shows and performances I've done while I talk. So I love that I followed yours, because what I was going to talk about is that the role of artists since the beginning of time has been to be the documentarians of who we are as societies. From ancient societies that no longer exist to the one we're living in right now, how we know about each other and what each society stood up for, believed in, the culture of the society is through the art that is left behind. Whether that is through the murals, through sculpture, through literature, through the plays that were left behind. That is how we know about ancient societies that don't even exist anymore. It's through the artists. But the other role of artists in society is we are the ones who question, what does life mean? And we try to capture these big questions through our art. So lots of times our art are not the answers to those questions, but our art is a way to explore these questions with other people. And as people engage in the art that we create, that is how we discover who we are as a people. So I'm going to just share, this is a poem that I actually wrote about that. And again, some of these things, when I say I write poetry, I do not write poetry. I just literally scribbled this out one day when I was trying to just capture my thoughts on this. Because again, as an artist, most of what I've done with my art is really just try to grapple with the big questions that I have about life. And the easiest way that I've found to grapple with that is through art. So the essence of life. So many live their day to day and move on to the next, and then the next, and the next after that, until there are no more days like before, just to lay themselves down to sleep forevermore. And that is it. That is all. That is a life, and then it is done. As artists, as creative makers, as thought generators, as idea innovators, we too do the same, but one simple step more. We ponder the big questions of why, and how, and what if, and try to connect these seemingly random moments into a larger pattern or narrative for all to explore. In a magical alchemy of experience and imagination, we strive to make sense of it all, to create meaning, to define our purpose as human beings, and the result is the essence of art, which is the essence of life. These are the ahas of why we are put on this earth, of what we are meant to do, of who we are, and what makes life worth the battles we have won, and its journey as rich and fulfilling as one could ever desire or hope for. Just seeing where we're at on this slide. So lots of times my art as a theater maker really intersects with my personal volunteer time as an activist. As Asian Americans and as a woman of color in particular, we oftentimes have to face, it's ironic that I became a theater artist because half of what we're judged on as an actor is not just the work that we do, but it's actually based on the way that we look, and that makes it really, really crazy to be a theater artist. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are in theater? Okay, okay, just curious. So I'm going to talk about something that maybe most of you have not really experienced before. But one of the things that we're faced with as artists is the stereotype of being passive, a model minority on the surface, but we're so much more underneath. And actually, since we're getting to the end of our slides, I'm actually going to leave it there, and we'll be talking a little bit more in response to some panel questions coming up. We have one more slide after this. Again, some of these are from different theaters that I've worked with throughout my career, and these are all of my social media handles, so you can always connect with me via that. All right, thanks.
Hi. I'm using my slideshow as like my mental cue, so that's why I need to like look at it. This is kind of like scaled down from an hour-long talk I did on my art practice. So, hello, my name is Vi, if you want to follow me on social media. Otherwise, my name is Vivian Hsieh, or in Chinese, Hua Ting Ting. My art practice, I would say, is kind of summed up with two kind of main components. One, my belief that art has the potential to better the self and society, and my metaphysical interests. So those kind of guide me in my art practice as far as direction as well as content. Starting off when I was younger, I was kind of more into social practice type stuff. I would hold up a sign that said "talk to us" and kind of talk to random people for hours. I also did free hugs in Japan once. The other guys had free hug signs. I had a sign that said "hugs for 1 yen," which is like 0.01% or 0.01 cents, and no one would give me money. And then last year, or a couple years ago after the election, I also kind of did it. I also do things such as, after the discovery of this invention called the mindfold, I decided to blindfold myself for a day, and went on this, had a show at a gallery where I had people participate in a blindness exercise, so they got to choose a sense that they wanted to explore, and then I would blindfold them and take them around the mall and have them document their experience. So on the left side, we have this person who, they got to see the form before they went on the blindness exercise, and then they kind of had to recreate from memory where the box was and then write in their answers. The guy on the right says, "Did it really smell, or elevators smell funny," is what he said. Later on, I started a music and art publication from 2004 to 2017, essentially, and it was initially about fighting the independent fight back when major labels were not a huge thing. Major labels were the dominant thing, and as time went on and arts changed and the music industry changed, it became more about connecting the arts with deeper philosophical ideas, spiritual ideas, politics, literature, all these things. So we do articles, I don't know if you guys can read this, but bilingualism and US Indian musicians, upwards trends of Spanish English lyricism, glitch art, and how that connects with digital and analog, race relations and the use of skin color and marketing early blues and jazz records, things like that. Also fun, an article about Nietzsche and how his myths compare with Michael Jackson. As the years went on, when I turned 30 a few years ago, I decided I had spent my entire 20s kind of helping other people elevate their art practice, and I needed to focus on my own. So I kind of embarked on film, and my first short film was called Searching Skies. You can watch it online on Vimeo. It's about a Syrian refugee family that goes to an American family's house for Christmas dinner, and the kind of tense dialogue that happens over the course of the dinner. that led me to co-promoting and co-curating a national screening series called the Seventh Art Stand, which is about combining nonprofit groups with theaters to have discussions around anti-Islamophobia issues. We had about 50 venues in over half the states, and a lot of people were given their opportunity to meet the first Muslim person they'd ever met in their life and ask questions. So it was like a very powerful learning experience. So now, basically, doing that film led me to doing the Seventh Art Stand, led me to now becoming the executive director of Northwest Film Forum. It's all been kind of connected. And Northwest Film Forum, if you all aren't familiar, is in Seattle and Capitol Hill. We do a lot of work at the intersection of film and using it as a tool for activism, community dialogue, interdisciplinary arts, all that stuff. So that's me in a nutshell, and you can follow me online. Thank you.
Same thing.
Except quicker.
Yeah, except quicker. Because I did the same thing into the PowerPoint, but I felt like I dialed in, and then, anyways. I thought there would be a clock on here, so I'm going to go really fast. I went to art school at Cornish College of the Arts, and I majored in visual art and painting and sculpture. And one of the things is when we were graduating, a teacher said only 10% of you will be making art in 10 years. And I remember I thought to myself, well, if I'm not making art, I'll be curating, which has kind of been my life, a little bit of all of it. So I got out of school and I didn't know where to show my work as a Black female artist. So I worked with some friends and got money from like family and friends and opened up a Fair Gallery Cafe, which was an interdisciplinary art space. We had music shows, gallery shows, exhibitions every month, and poetry readings, theater, anything you could think of, and it was a space for, entry-level space for people to get in and kind of experiment and do things that they wanted. Here's some examples of some of the shows that I showed. This was a friend of mine from college. This was a guy I'd met, really great Latino artist. So different things we did, Project Runway nights. So this just kind of shows you kind of what I did. I did that for 6 years. And then I had to close it. And then I started working with Kathy at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, and I'm a public art project manager there. This is me working with some of the artists that I work with, so I've been able to kind of bridge my skills and interests in the arts and kind of curatorial skills as well in helping artists see their projects. So these are a lot of emerging artists that went through a project called Public Art Bootcamp that we did, where we train artists in public art practices. This is Poetry on Buses, so it's a poetry project, so a lot of my projects span many different disciplines. I'm just showing a sample of things that I've managed. And then in my personal practice, I've gotten back into, like Vivian, in the last year. So this is a gallery show I had at a friend's studio, all about unaffordability. They made paintings of apartments I couldn't afford and then took out language that I thought was coded and gated to who they wanted to live there. So these are some, they're on pillowcases. And then I gave out these keychains. They were kind of like a love poem, but also another thing about unaffordability. And then I started working with a coworker who's also my collaborator, and we started just experimenting. So we did kind of a radical self-love performance, and then asked people on Valentine's Day last year to submit their own personal declarations of self-love. And then we put it together into a poem. And so there's like a link, if you search City Arts Radical Self-Love, you can actually download the poem. There's some pictures from that. And then I had another show that was investigating kind of my lifelong issues with weight, and I've definitely come to like a place where I've accepted that, but I did things that people had said to me throughout my life on plates, and then did some redaction poetry and things like that. So here's some redaction poetry. And then people were invited to write their own kind of personal stories around weight and food and put them in a bowl on recipe cards. I made this cake made at Safeway. They probably thought it was weird, but it was artwork. And then I started curating briefly at a space in Pioneer Square. Last summer I got an opportunity from a friend, and we did, so I decided if I'm only going to do this for a couple months, I want to go big and go Black. So I did an art exhibition of 19 Black artists of the Northwest, and that was really fun. And this is me showing people around the space. And showed a friend's work that I've known since high school. He has large scale, really large paintings. So this is us in front of one of his paintings. You can get the scale. And that led me to an opportunity. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have. I also, so one of my things, like, one of the questions was like, where do you find funding? And I think throughout my career, I've been very DIY. I just kind of think of stuff and figure it out. So me and some friends wanted to figure out how to get more people to collect art. And then we just kind of pooled like $100 each and rented a party bus and take people on tours. This is John Grade's studio, if you're familiar with his work. We took people there. We have a chef come and give people food. People pay about $50, $60, and they get to go to about 5 or 6 galleries, a studio, and they get food and drinks. So that's just kind of like a passion project. So you don't really, I kind of haven't depended on other people for my own funding. This is more of my public art practice. My collaborator, Kristen, I'm going to keep going fast because I'm probably at time soon. Okay. I'm just going to keep going. And then because of the other thing I curated in Pioneer Square, I was asked to co-curate the Portland Biennial. So that's been a really exciting, fun time to drive down to Portland once a month and learn about artists and galleries down there. So I've been kind of having an exciting time, and I do wear a lot of many different hats. And what I was going to end with was just kind of like what me and some friends just this January decided to do a black susu. And a susu is a West African tradition of money savings club. So each month, every person puts in $50, and then one person gets the entire pot. So the first person who got it in January is using their money to like amp up this Cool Out Network, which is a bunch of local hip hop videos. And then the second person brought in they were bringing in a local filmmaker. And so we're using that as a way to kind of do our own inner circle black-led organizing. So I think in terms of DIY, you can fund your own projects and think of creative ways to do that in community.
Thank you. Andrea LeHalle. And my history has been really mixed between cinema or filmmaking and music. I've been involved in both pretty much my whole life. And I guess the biggest transition in my life is I moved to Europe after completing NYU film. Gisella and I had the same alma mater. So finished in New York in 2000 and moved to Europe because it seemed like a good idea. Started working in film and quickly met the most amazing people I've ever met in my life who've become lifelong friends and lifelong collaborators. So the first slide is actually going to be video, and I'll probably sneak back to that at the end. With this group of people, we created something called Film Fabric, which is essentially a period when you get together a bunch of people over a defined period of time and make a whole bunch of films. We did it 3 times, once in Prague. This is a fundraising trailer that we made essentially to look for money. And we did it the first time in France in 2004, which was 6 weeks long. We made 10 films, and then we did it in Finland for about 3 weeks and also made 4 films, like the Prague edition. So actually just go ahead and play that now. So I don't, this is 2006, so I don't know if this was technically before GoFundMe and all those guys started, but we thought we were pretty cutting edge by putting together a fundraising video. Yes.
My name is Abraham Danielsson and I come from Iceland.
I'm Marie and I'm from Denmark.
Andrea and I'm American.
Veronica from Prague.
Odu, I'm from Norway.
Astrid, I'm from Germany.
Benoit, I'm from Paris.
Film Fabric.
Film Fabric.
Film Fabric.
Film Fabric.
I'm in Film Fabric because it's a great opportunity to work with professionals.
People that inspire me.
People from all around are coming into one place for the exchange.
We all help each other.
I work in production.
I'm organizing Film Fabric.
For this little playground between heaven and hell.
For me, Film Fabric is one of the only contexts of what independent filmmaking is today.
Rolling. Me, take one. My film is about imbalance.
Obsession.
Video installation. Subconsciousness.
Madness. Salvation.
Making the viewer experience a film.
Prague. Yeah. Prague is where everything started.
It is very visual.
Prague is quite an inspiring city.
Because it's a city of metamorphosis.
Of creation.
It's my hometown.
the chance to bring together a lot of people that met here 10 years ago.
Good people a lot. To explore and
work on films and projects together and support each other.
It's just such an opportunity that you don't have in everyday life.
it's fun.
I think we missed one question, which is why would you give money to the project?
So this project is followed the format of a lot of residencies or collaborative projects that I did while I was in Europe for those 14 years. This is one picture from Filmfabric in Finland. There's me working really hard, sitting on the... That's the assistant director. This is a slide that has some of my combined projects. On the top are 2 residencies that I was a part of, and as a creative, mixing mediums as well. I've worked in installations and performance art and things like that. Some residencies are really great opportunities to get a space. Often you get a stipend, your food and board are paid, and you're surrounded by the energy of a lot of great people to work on your craft and also share it with other people while it's in development. So that's always been a great space, so those are opportunities that you can look for. And the top right is my band, and the bottom right was the Red Bull Music Academy, which actually happened in Seattle in 2005. It's my first time in Seattle before moving back here. Today, I'm directing the Langston Hughes African American Film Festival, which is 16 years in running this year. Mark your calendars, April 25th to 28th. And if we talk about having your cocoon, your community of people, I was a difficult transition. It was an intentional transition to move to Seattle and to leave Europe, where I spent 14 years really working with a lot of the people that you saw in that video closely and really helped forge me as an artist. So when I came here, I left all those people and I had a big hole in my artistic soul. And then I met Zola, who curates this festival, and immediately I found a community again of creatives and people who were passionate about cinema, which I'd spent most of my life devoted to, and became involved in this festival. And this is just a picture from the festival 2 years ago, but it really exemplifies the community that is around that festival and that helps support me as an artist. I'd say I'm an artist on pause. I have my day job. I've got 2 young kids at home, so my creative muscle hasn't been exercised as much as I'd liked it to be, but being a part of amazing projects like this reassure me that I've got a lot more creative years to come, and all my, singing lullabies at night are just the fodder that are gonna stoke the fire and make it explode again soon. So I'm not active on social media. It's part of my work, so social media is for work. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect, and I read my email. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all, that was really awesome. And so you all kind of like touched on this next question a little bit, but I'm really curious if you have some more thoughts to share about kind of what got you started as an artist, and is there a particular moment that kind of sparked that inspiration for you to move forward in this field?
I can speak to that really quickly. I got started musically. I always kind of did the music thing and performed, but as a filmmaker, there was definitely one transitional point. I consider myself a technician for so long. I focused on sound and cinematography in film school, wasn't on a directing track at all, never felt that I had much to say as a director, and didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. And one of the women that you see in the video, the French girl with curly hair, who's my dearest best friend, when she was starting to prepare Filmfabric 1, the workshop in France in 2004, she reached out to a lot of people and invited them to her home, actually, in the south of France to do the project. And I was definitely down with going, and I was like, okay, I can be a director of photography on a bunch of projects, like that's totally my film. And she's like, well, why wouldn't you direct? And I was like, I don't direct. And she was like, why don't you direct? You should direct. And I was like, let me think about that. And that was definitely the first nudge, and I don't know, 10, 15 short films later, she was right to nudge me.
I don't know, I found out I needed to be an artist in high school. I was always a poet since I was 13. Decided to go to art school. And I guess it's like a fire that never dies, because when I closed my business, I was like, I'm gonna be a lactation consultant or a linguist or something, and then I just came back. So it's, I guess if it's really in your spirit, you can't really let it go.
For me, art has always been a part of my life. I did a lot of Chinese dancing when I was little for my parents, and then played piano, and actually at one point I was going to be a concert pianist and was rehearsing like 4 hours every day after school. But the reason why I kind of fell into theater is because I always like to do the thing that terrifies me the most. And as I said, I was really shy and introverted growing up. And there was something about, in 9th grade, my high school teacher forced all of us to audition for the school play, and I actually got cast. And there was something about working together with a group of people to create something that we then share with other group of people as the audience. And that collaboration and being outside of yourself and actually disappearing within a character was amazing to me. It was different than my shyness about just kind of being myself with other people. I could actually hide behind a character, and the work of collaborating instead of being competitive with other people was what really attracted me. And like Liz said, is like I thought I would like not do it anymore. I was going to do what my parents wanted, go into business. But then I kept on auditioning for shows all throughout college, and actually I worked with Zola too. She cast me in a film really early on where I got to play a basketball player. Well, that was one of the scenes. We got to play basketball, and all the other women in the film were black. And she shot it in such a way where I was the one who was shooting all the baskets and making all the hoops. And that was what I loved about acting, was that you could actually break the stereotypes. And it was mostly, the reason why I decided to go into it is because I realized like I never got to see someone look like me on film, on television, in theater, anywhere. And being able to be that, the first time I saw a play that actually had people look like me, it was mind-blowing. And that's when I realized, like, this is what I want to do. Since then, I've mostly been working on actually creating opportunities for other people of color to be able to be in film and television and in plays. And that's where I really feel like I'm making a difference.
So I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I got into film in high school. So one of my, not professors, my teachers, it was religion class because they went to a Catholic school. We had a choice to either write a paper or do a presentation or make a film on a martyr. And I chose Nelson Mandela, and there was no way that I was going to write a paper. There was no way I was going to do a presentation, so I was going to do a film. And that was my first time doing filmmaking and doing documentary, and I loved doing it. I felt like really in control behind the camera. It was a lot of fun, and that's kind of like how I got started and how I decided I wanted to go to film school, and then got me on that whole track.
Thank you all. Should I use this? Can you hear me? I think for the document. That's right. Also, surprise, there is a camera here. So you can't see you all, but just make sure if you're walking back and forth, there's a camera in the back. Okay. So our next question. Thank you all for sharing. That's something that I feel is important to share, like kind of what those moments of inspiration are. And I think considering the times now, it can be, maybe this is a great, ripe time to talk about and explore those avenues of inspiration and kind of how that influences your art. And I'd be curious to hear about that in a little bit, but before that, how is it, as women of color, how do you find those communities that you kind of touched on are so vital to the work that you do? How do you connect to those communities, and how did you initially find that perhaps in Seattle or in your other places you've done your work?
Well, I think at Northwest Film Forum we're trying to create a lot of the community and create spaces where people of color feel comfortable making work and learning how to make work, because that's a big part, I think, of filmmakers feeling uncomfortable telling their stories, because it's hard to find crew that's not all just white males specifically, like hardly even women. So training is a big aspect of what we're trying to do, trying to help people do. And I'm also part of like a collective of filmmakers who are all people of color that just support each other on different film projects, so that helps. So, and as far as the susu thing, I wanted to comment on that because my grandma actually did that in Taiwan back in the day, so that's like a really cool idea. So I want to bring that.
I was going to say my friend who's Korean just told me that her family did it. it too. So, so many different cultures. I guess I'll just go next. Yeah, I think similarly creating that community. So just like for some perspective, I was born and raised in Seattle, and when I was born here, the Black population was 12%, and now it's 6%. So I actually mourn it viscerally in my body, the Black community that's not here that I grew up with. So growing, like I said, graduating from college and wanting to find communities to build around, I actually have to intentionally go out and like ask people to meet up with me, and like we start things together. So a lot of my work, I guess, has been unintentional arts organizing, and that was really what FAIR was. I didn't know where to show my work. And you go knock on a, I mean, all of you probably already know this. You go to a gallery and they're like, I will not look at your slides. And then you're like, well, how are you supposed to show my work? So it was kind of like an exact, in opposition to that. I would look at people's work, I would give them shows. And so I work at the Office of Arts and Culture as a way of like not personally financing that work, but being able to give the same opportunities to other people with taxpayer dollars, because that's how it should be spent. But I think I'm always looking for more community, because I feel like I meet amazing people and they can't afford to live here and they move. So I think it's kind of an ongoing thing of trying to meet creatives, creatives of color, create spaces where they feel like they can stay in the city and are welcome, and keep that going.
And for me, same thing, which is my real passion I found was not actually doing theater or acting. It was actually creating community around people who want to do it. Because I realized like the whole reason of getting into theater was because it was so collaborative, but then realized like, oh, as an actor, you actually have to go and audition to be in shows and someone has to choose you, and you realize every single audition that I went, and I started auditioning really young, 14, 15, 16, for big Disney films and stuff like that, is like you go in and everyone looks exactly like you, and all you're being cast for is a very stereotypical role, and like, okay, this is not what I thought this was going to be. So decided to create my own opportunities to share with other people. So, you know, when I started out, I would actually gather like all the Asian American actors in town, and we formed this actors group where we'd meet once a week and we'd actually kind of work out together by rehearsing scenes, reading plays, sharing what we each knew. Whenever there was an audition coming around town where they needed Asian American, or usually it's one Asian American in a play, I would actually have everyone work on the audition pieces together, and then we'd cheer each other on, and then I'd pay for the space and accompanist if it was a musical, and then we'd all go and audition together, and afterwards we'd all like give each other high fives, and then whoever got cast, because we knew only one of us was going to get cast, we would all celebrate by going to see them in that show. And that might seem counter to what is norm, like all my friends would go to LA, it's the exact opposite, where everyone's competing, and so ironically, as Asian American women in particular, or African American women, or Latinx men, or whoever it is, usually you see them as your competition. And the sad reality is that's the way racism is framed in our society. You see other people of color that look like you as your greatest competition, or if you're women, you see other women as your greatest competition. And that's what divides us as opposed to bring us together in solidarity. So we actually have to fight against those systems by actually creating the community that will support each other despite the way the colonializers have designed our society to be in here in the United States. And so that's a lot of my work now, is how do we actually break those paradigms that currently exist that are racist and create communities where we actually support each other. Because the more of us that are strong and audition well together, then the more opportunities that people will see like, whoa, there's all these fabulous Asian American actors in town, we need to create more opportunities for them. And so that's how we break the systems that exist.
I find my perspective a bit funnier warped because the 14 years that I lived in Europe, I spent them quite in isolation as an African American woman, and didn't have a lot of local references to parallel. Having left NYU, didn't have a strong African American or women of color community there that I kept in touch with while I was gone. So much of my creation was me asking a lot of questions of myself and identity and not having anyone to bounce them off of. So that's part of why when I came to Seattle and got involved in the film festival, there was just so much more dialogue about things that I was thinking, but were just like circulating inside my head because my friends, that you saw in the video, more than happy to speak with me about race and things like that, but in a similar position of me of not being able to go any deeper, not having any references. So the importance of community and people seeing yourself and being able to process your art with people who look like you has become more and more important to me because I lacked that for so long. And so I'm happy with the festival. I can create that opportunity for other people and not only make it an exclusive conversation, but to share that conversation with other people because it is so important, and I missed out on that for a really long time.
I kind of have a similar experience to you, Andrea. Like in film school, it's kind of like a boys' club, and it's very predominantly white, and coming back to Seattle, it's still kind of the same, especially as a documentary filmmaker. Like there's not that many documentary filmmakers out there in Seattle, and then if you're putting like person of color or woman, that's like even less. So I do struggle with that sometimes, and I think what I've kind of come to realize is that it's really important to like build multiple kinds of communities, not just like focus on one. So finding people or mentors that are, a lot of people that are in my community that I think I look up to and respect and admire and I talk to aren't in film, like they're doing other things. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, being intentional with like not just focusing on people who are just in art or just a filmmaker, but thinking about other people who do help you, inspire you. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. You all kind of talked about that love piece, that forming a community based off of identities, and you all hit on what it means to be a woman of color within your respective areas in interesting ways. And so with that, we have the love part, now the funding part. How does money come into play with that? Given that, being a woman, obviously there's the pay discrepancies, being a person of color, there's also that in place as well. So where have you been successful in finding the funding that you need as an artist or that you'd like to have as an artist, and what funding sources would you recommend to upcoming artists?
I can talk a little bit about that. So I actually, for this documentary specifically, A Brief History of Time Travel, I struggled a lot for funding for that. A lot of the grants that I was applying to initially, they are for documentary films. They're more geared towards social justice issues. This film obviously isn't about that. It's about pop culture, and I wanted to make a film that was about a topic that I was interested in, which is time travel and science fiction. And so it was really hard for me. I applied to so many grants. There wasn't funding there, so I ended up doing a Kickstarter campaign, and I raised $40K doing that in 30 days, and it was really hard and intense, but I really I think the great thing about the society that we're in right now and capitalism and everything, it's that you are able to have these crowdfunding platforms and having so many people that are funding your project. It's so empowering. So that's my spiel about funding.
So this may not be the advice that you might want to hear, but it's what has worked for me. I've been very lucky in that every single job I've ever had has been in the arts in some way, but not necessarily as an artist per se. And I've pieced together a lot of different things. So lots of times artists will come to me, especially actors, theater actors, and I really want to make money at this. And I'm like, the reality in the United States, if you look at the stats, is less than 1% of people who go into theater or acting of any kind, including film, will ever make enough money to be able to sustain themselves in that. But it doesn't mean that you have to give up that dream of doing it. And so the way I have a very practical mind and a very business savvy mind, and so I've always been you don't have to make money doing what you love. And in fact, a lot of theater actors I know, because they wanted to try to make money in acting, they often end up doing especially as people of color, really stereotypical, awful roles because that's what paid. And it's like, why would you compromise your art in doing stuff you don't want just to make money from it? So the advice I usually give is, most of us don't have just one thing that we're talented in or interested in. Find whatever the other thing that you can do that actually makes money and pays the bills, and then you don't ever have to compromise your art, and then you can still do your art. It sometimes is a balance that way, but sometimes that alleviates the frustration of having to do it. So a lot of the jobs I've been able to pay my bills with have been doing bookkeeping for companies, theater companies, doing marketing, doing grant writing, doing all these other things that I actually have really strong talent in, and I actually like being able to do all those different things, because the nice thing about acting is the more life experience we have in other things, it actually feeds our art even more. And so now I have the luxury of all the things that I do acting-wise, I actually do now, amazingly, get paid for. And it might be a small stipend, it might be a large amount of money. Believe it or not, like you do a commercial or you do like one 5-line role in a television show, and they keep paying me money, and that will sustain me. But what I do is I take all the money I earn from acting, and I've been doing this for a long time now. Anything I make from doing my art, I actually put into a savings account. And that's the money I use to be able to fund projects that I can pay other artists to do stuff with me. And that gives me great joys to be able to, like right now, my next piece is, Sis Productions is my company. It's a women-centered Asian American company. And what we do is, our next piece on April 2nd at Langston Hughes, it will be an evening of, I've invited these Asian American female writer-performers to write their own sort of origin stories in 3 to 7 minute pieces, and it can be monologue, dance, whatever art form they want, a TED Talk, however they want to do it. And it's just a way to showcase, because we're still so invisible, it's a way to showcase that. So I'm able to just take money that I earn and put it towards that. But my day job is giving out grants. So if you are interested in finding about individual artist grants in whatever art form, and you live in Seattle, you can come to me, and I can get you ideas for how to write grants.
She's very helpful. She's very good at that. Like I said, everything I've done has kind of been DIY. So I think pooling resources with friends and community, you actually get more money than you actually think you could. And that then you're only accountable to each other, and you're all invested in something. It really could take $100 from your personal paycheck. And I know it feels like a lot, but sometimes you could really leverage those funds. So like I said, collect is something I do with some folks, and we really just put in a little bit of money. We charge people $60, and we make it all back. So you can do whatever I'm kind of at the old, you can do whatever you want to do, and it doesn't take that much money. But also to your point, I was talking to an artist friend who is in her 70s, and I was like, how do you pay your bills? And she was saying she does a lot of arts residencies, so that's an opportunity. I have a 7-year-old, so that's not something I feel like I can take a part of, but you're in your art career, maybe you can. And you still have to figure out how you're going to pay your rent, or something like that. Some of them actually pay your rent for you and give you a stipend while you're there, and you can also produce. Because one of the other things I think is hard is finding time to make your work, because you can't make money without having the time to make it. And then, gosh, I was going to say one other thing about funding. There was other than residency. But, well, and just think, kind of what Kathy was saying, I think connecting your work to something that can make money for you. So if you make hats or t-shirts or something like that that kind of keeps you in your practice, that also makes money for you. So those are kind of my ideas. But I'm trying to, that's what I was going to say. I have a public art project that me and my collaborator Kristen are doing. It's a $72,000 commission in Tacoma. It's our first permanent commission, but I've been teaching people how to do public art for 4 years now, and there's not enough people of color or young people or women or just anybody, even men. We need more diversity in the field. And it's a way they actually pay artists for their ideas to put it in the public realm. So I definitely say to get into public art, it's not necessarily easy, but again, you can contact me at my day job, and I can meet with you and talk to you about how the field works.
Also, in terms of Kathy talking about getting jobs that help promote your art or help support your art, that helps build skills for you to be able to barter with people as well, like barter for skill trade on like stuff like film is super useful. So.
I would only follow up with the community and connection aspect. Sometimes as an artist you can feel like you're in a vacuum and isolated again. And every person you reach out to, every person you connect with can really just help you be more connected with the potential of your creations reaching the community. And as hard as it feels sometimes, you have to remember that society is hungry for what you're doing, and as many doors that get shut in your face or opportunities that you don't think that are opening up to you, we want to see what you're doing, people want to see what you're doing, so unfortunately it's a matter of just getting connected with the right person at the right time, but people need what you're doing. It's, yeah, we've had the conversation about how creation and art is, as you were saying earlier, it's how we document, it's how we process what's going on. So there's a need for it. So it's just about finding the right people to connect you with those galleries or with those screenings and things like that. So hopefully we're a portal potentially to some of you for the future.
Great, thank you all. Those are all of the formalized questions that we have. We could give our lovely panelists a round of applause. Thank you all so much for sharing your art and your wisdom. And like they shared, there's probably a lot of other questions you all may have, just given the information that was presented. So as mentioned, we'll have a reception area just right outside with cookies and coffee and water and maybe other goodies. So yes, please take part, please interact with our panelists. They have a lot of wealth of information that you all should know. So thank you all for coming, and happy Wednesday.